A quiet Sunday lunch in regional Australia. A homemade meal. 4 family members seated around a table. Within days, 3 of them were dead. Not from guns, not from violence, but from a fungus, one of the most poisonous mushrooms in the world. In 2025, a jury in Victoria convicted a 50-year-old woman of murdering 3 relatives by serving them a beef Wellington laced with death cap mushrooms. A crime that shocked the world. Today, we're going to explore what happened at the lunch, the science behind death cap mushrooms, the evidence that led to a conviction, and the sentence that was handed down, all while staying respectful to the victims and the seriousness of this case. Let's begin.
Welcome to Shadow Docket Files, where the cases buried in the shadows are brought to light. Here we dive deep into forgotten trials, chilling evidence, and the mysteries hidden in plain sight. Subscribe and join us as we open the files they don't want you to see.
Before the events of July 2023, Erin Patterson lived a largely private life in regional Victoria. She worked in administrative and clerical roles, including positions associated with Melbourne Airport. These roles were office-based, involving paperwork, coordination, and compliance. Colleagues later described her as having a fiery or assertive personality at work. She was reportedly confident in her opinions, sometimes outspoken in discussions. In her early training days to become an air traffic controller, the head of training walked in behind Erin, and the cord of her headset was on the floor. He happened to get his foot caught in the wire, and it pulled off her headset. And without blinking, Erin turned around fast and shouted at the instructor. In 2005, she moved in with a friend. They would often go out and drink. One night, she got into a car accident while driving under the influence, and her license got suspended. A friend said when they would hang out in groups, she would crave being around them all and stay there till the end. During her time as an air traffic controller, she would often leave early, and in this job, that is not something you can just do, as in seconds, something could change and go very badly wrong. One day, Erin was called in to HR. When she sat down, HR asked her to explain herself, why she had been leaving early. Erin denied it. So HR showed her some video footage of her car leaving the premises multiple times over the last 2 weeks. Her response to this was, well, okay, you got me. Following this, she was terminated from her job at the airport. Erin and Simon's friendship seemed strong, even though they had been separated for many years. They were still in touch as friends, often calling and texting each other, even going on holidays with each other without the kids. In 2022, they went on a camping trip, as they sometimes did. That night, Simon ate some chicken curry Erin made for him. He thought nothing of it, and went to bed. Later that night, Simon said he woke up feeling violently ill. So much so, he had to go to hospital for 20 days, and 16 of those being in a coma. He had several surgeries as they couldn't find out what was wrong. However, Simon believed that it was a part of a string of attempts to take his life. this was never put in front of a jury. On July 29th, 2023, Erin Patterson invited 4 guests to her home in Leongatha, Victoria, Australia, for a beef Wellington lunch. Those guests were Don Patterson, Gail Patterson, Heather Wilkinson, and Ian Wilkinson. They were all relatives of her ex-husband Simon. Simon was invited to this lunch, however he said he couldn't make it. All 4 ate the meal. Within hours, they became violently ill and were taken to hospital with symptoms consistent with severe poisoning. 3 of them, Don, Gail, and Heather, died within a week. The 4th, Ian Wilkinson, survived after weeks of treatment that set off a criminal investigation that captured worldwide attention. When news first spread through South Gippsland, it didn't feel like a headline. It felt personal. This wasn't a distant tragedy happening somewhere far away. It happened in a quiet regional community where people knew each other by name, where faces aren't anonymous. Don and Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson weren't just names in a news report. They were parents, grandparents, friends, familiar figures in local circles. In small towns, loss travels differently. There's no separation between the story and real life. You might pass the same people at the supermarket every week. You might attend the same church. You might have shared decades of conversations. So when 3 members of one extended family died so suddenly, the shock rippled outward. Not just through relatives, but through neighbours, social groups, and community networks. For many locals, the grief was compounded by confusion. But how could something like this happen at what should have been a simple family lunch? And then came national and international attention. News vans, cameras, headlines across the world. For some residents, that spotlight felt intrusive. For others, it ensured the victims were remembered as people, not just part of a case. In the weeks that followed, community members reportedly offered quiet support, meals, messages, fundraising efforts, and space for the surviving family to grieve. The sole survivor, Ian Wilkinson, endured a long hospital recovery, and for many in the community, his survival became both a relief and a painful reminder of what had been lost. In regional towns, tragedy can either fracture people or bring them closer. And here, many described a community leaning on one another, navigating grief together. Even while the legal process unfolded. Because long after courtrooms close and verdicts are delivered, it's communities that carry the emotional weight. The lunch was later confirmed to have toxins consistent with death cap mushrooms, one of the deadliest fungi known worldwide. Here's how they work. Death caps contain amatoxins, substances that attack the liver and other vital organs. Initial symptoms often resemble severe food poisoning, which can delay treatment. Without rapid medical intervention, liver failure and death can follow. In this case, chemical analysis of leftovers from the meal detected toxins consistent with death camp mushroom poisoning. But how these dangerous mushrooms ended up in the mill, and whether it was intentional, became the central question of the trial. We'll return to that after we look at the investigation. Investigators looked at where the mushroom came from, computer and phone searches, statements made by Erin Patterson, forensic evidence from leftover meal samples. Prosecutors presented mobile phone data and digital evidence showing that Patterson had earlier visited web pages about death cap mushrooms, suggesting she may have researched where they grew. The prosecution also alleged that Patterson used these wild foraged mushrooms, dehydrated them, and added them all to the meal in powdered form. Her explanation was that she mixed mushrooms from different sources, including those bought from grocery stores. In 2025, Patterson's case went to trial in the Supreme Court of Victoria. The jury heard weeks of evidence about the chemistry of the toxins, digital searches and digital forensic evidence, witness testimony, including from the sole survivor. Prosecutors argued that Patterson deliberately used death cap mushrooms to poison the meal. Patterson maintained that any death caps in the meal were accidental and denied intent to harm. After an 11-week trial, the jury reached a verdict in July 2025. Erin Patterson was found guilty on all 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. Later that year, in September 2025, Patterson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum no parole period of 33 years. That means she must serve at least 33 years before she can be considered for parole. Considering time already served, she won't be eligible for release until around the 2050s. The judge remarked on the gravity of the crimes and Patterson's lack of remorse. Prosecutors have since argued that the sentence should be even longer, and signalled an appeal on that basis. Additionally, her defence has filed an appeal against the conviction itself. So, the legal process continues. This case struck a chord for several reasons. It involved an unusual method of death, food poisoning via a highly toxic mushroom. It occurred in what was supposed to be a family setting. It blended forensic science, digital evidence, and courtroom drama. And because it happened recently, public interest remains high as appeals and sentencing developments continue to unfold. A tragic lunch, 3 deaths, 1 survivor, and a woman now serving a life sentence. The severity of these events and legal outcomes remind us that true crime isn't just about headline moments, but about real people and families. This concludes the video on the mushroom cap murders. Thank you so much for watching and sticking through to the end. Please let me know what you thought of this case, and if you agree or disagree on the charges. However, please remember to keep respectful, as this is a real case about real people. Thank you once again, and I will see you next time.